Hello, students. Here with you for day number 5. Just wanted to touch base real quick from the blog entry from Monday and talking about the positives and negatives of college. And hopefully you're able to sit down and be honest with yourself on what you want to do. And I hope that you're not under the impression of me trying to say that college is the only answer for each of you. But again, like I said, it's kind of that time, especially if you're a senior, if you haven't thought about it very much, it's time to have a pretty honest conversation with yourself, your parents, people that care about you, and be able to be confident in what your decision is, whatever that might be. Um, the one thing I want to talk about thinking economically about it is one of the conversations I have with students is that they take a year off to save money so they can pay for some of the expensive part of college, right? I think one thing to keep in mind, if that is how you might be thinking, is remember that when we talk about these trade-offs in our notes today, remember that if every year you don't go to college, you also lose a year of income earning after college. And obviously, you're probably going to college to earn more money than you would earn before college if you're trying to save up. So, for example, even if you were able to save, let's say, $15,000 in a year, that's going to only be able to pay for maybe a year and a half of college, which is commendable. It's great. But remember, after you graduate, hopefully you're having a job that you're going to increase your income very significantly, whether it's up to $50,000 or $60,000 a year. So kind of keep that in mind and understand that those are some things that are trade-offs of making those decisions. Okay, so on to I did want to like I said I wanted to touch base on that just to give you a little bit of an idea. Okay, on to that what we're talking about today. The first thing I want you to do is define incentive. Take a minute, pause the video, think about a reward or a punishment that gets you to behave in certain ways. And we're continuing those after you do that. We're continuing those notes that we started back on uh, day 4. So hopefully you were able to look up incentive and realizing that it is a punishment or a reward for doing something. It's how we try to motivate people sometimes, whether it's a positive motivation or a negative motivation in terms of a punishment for doing certain things. Okay, so today we're getting into the what are referred to as the economic principles, and these are really just the things that economists use to justify their thoughts, justify their policies if those things occur. So the first one is that people make choices. We know that it's pretty obvious. It's kind of common sense. We've talked several times about those choices, and we also know that people's choices involve costs. So we give things up, whether it be as insignificant as a small amount of time, but usually we buy stuff and we have to spend our incomes on those things too. Okay, so we can look at the costs and benefits of certain things. There's short-term consequences and there's also long-term consequences, which brings us to principle number 3. Okay, things, for example, of having, if you sleep in and miss first period, like the immediate reward, the short term reward would be like you feel more refreshed. You might get that little bit of extra rest. If you make it a habit and those things of sleeping through class and missing a lot of class, well, obviously in the long run, that could have a negative effect, right? And so the consequences, what feels like positive in the short run can be there and then also turn negative in the long run. Um, and again, these influence our decisions on why we do certain things. Number 4 is that people are going to respond to incentives in predictable ways. So again, we kind of started out our talk today with this topic and the idea that we punish people and reward people for certain things, and the punishments and rewards don't have to be extreme, right? And they don't have to be some like jail time for an extreme punishment or $10,000 for an extreme reward. Um, they can be much simpler, and maybe it's just that your parents let you stay out a half hour later for being on time all week to school. I don't know, it could be things very simple, but we know that people are going to respond to incentives in predictable ways if we can figure out what their incentives are. So sometimes that's harder to predict. And when we talk about an entire economy or society, it can be really hard to predict how large groups of people are going to respond to incentives. So your daily blog number two is this store manager here has come up with an incentive, okay, for the customer to collect $100. Now this is actually in South Africa, so it's not in the United States. But either way, let's call it dollars. And they said, hey, listen, we want to make sure you get a receipt, and if you don't get a receipt or your receipt is wrong, um, tell the cashier and he'll give you $100. So see if you can come up with here in the next minute or two. I'm going to pause and see if you can come up with some creative answers as to why the manager would do something like this for something that we would think is pretty insignificant as far as a receipt. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you guys came up with some things like, hey, listen, if I'm a customer and I see this, maybe I buy more stuff because there's a chance that the cashier screws something up. Maybe it just gets a person to go buy something, period, because hey, if I buy something, there's a chance that I get $100 if they don't give me a receipt. Um, I'd be interested to see, obviously it's hard to if you are at home, but I'd be interested to see how many of you came up with the reasons why the store would want to do this. For example, maybe customer service is usually a common answer. But I think the most interesting answer that I've heard is that the boss is trying to prevent his cashiers from stealing from the store. So if I were to ask you, most of the time, the first answer people are going to say on how to prevent people from stealing is that they would put cameras in. Well, the cameras are expensive in two ways. Number one, they have a dollar amount of probably thousands of dollars that has to obviously be paid. But there's also a time element that would be an extremely high cost as well because somebody has to watch those videos, right? Whether it's the boss or he has to hire somebody to watch those videos. So by doing this unique quick little sign right here, basically he has created a security camera that is actually paying him, right? His customers are now holding the cashiers accountable. Obviously, the cashiers can't cheat on the receipt because they are being watched by the customer. And so anyway, the sign was actually meant to prevent theft, and I think that it's a pretty ingenious way, a pretty cheap way to do so. Because once you get that cashier that screws up a few times, obviously, then you know who is messing things up. Okay, let's finish up with the rest of these principles. Um, People gain when they trade voluntarily. You think about like different countries and how much stuff we get that is imported on a day-to-day basis. If you had a cup of coffee today, it is very likely that that coffee was imported from somewhere else. Obviously, in the winter time, we import a lot of fruit from South America and Mexico, and where the warmer climates are, in season during our cold climate. Um, so again, when we trade, we not only get more stuff, but we can also sell our stuff that other countries need or other people need, and we also it also creates competition within companies and making things cheaper. Okay, because obviously there's a reason why we import a lot of cheap stuff from China because their labor is really cheap, and the competition drives prices down. Markets, if we can get buyers and sellers together, that's just a fancy way of saying buyers and sellers get together. Usually people start buying stuff, and there's a reason why we kind of buy stuff off of Amazon quite a bit because we're always in a market we're always has the availability of buying those things. Um, but if we can get buyers and sellers together, usually the buyer is going to want to sell it. Usually I'm sorry, the buyer is going to want to buy it and the seller is going to want to sell it. And we can usually eventually organize a price that works for everybody. Okay, we kind of take this for granted because, the shopping, the supermarket is where we usually go buy our food, right? And we don't get to negotiate the prices. We just decide if we're willing to pay that price for that particular product. And then we go on our way. The government can sometimes do things to improve markets or improve economies, meaning that right now the government is trying to figure out what they're going to do with unemployment payments, and if people still don't have a job due to COVID, how much money should they get? They're kind of dragging their feet a little bit. They can't come to an agreement in Congress and the president, but they're trying to figure out how to improve our society and how much money should those people receive and how long should they receive it for. So sometimes the government can make things better. If only sometimes they make it better, they can also make things worse. Um, Again, depending on who you talk to, you're going to get mixed emotions on what the government should do about certain things. Um, a country's wealth is dependent upon their ability to produce goods and services. That's pretty obvious. I would say that's the same for individuals. If a country has a lot of resources, they're usually going to figure out ways to get those out of the ground. Your assignment for today will go a little bit more into detail about those resources. If the government prints more money, then prices go up. Um, Again, that causes inflation. Some of you might be familiar with the situation that took place in the 1930s in Germany, where they decided to print a bunch of money, and eventually leads to hyperinflation and eventually, obviously, World War II in that particular case. But if people are poor, printing money is not the answer. Okay. And then the last one, which we talk about way later on, is that as a society or as an economy, we face a trade off between inflation and unemployment. So when unemployment is really low, okay, that means people are working, meaning that they're making money. If they're making money, they're going to spend it. If people spend money, it causes inflation. Okay, so we actually see when the economy is doing really well, we actually see some inflation, and that's as much as inflation is probably is not really an enjoyable thing. It's kind of a necessity for economies. On the flip side, when unemployment's really high and no one has jobs, think Great Depression. Okay, we actually see what is referred to as deflation. Prices go down. So again, there's kind of a good and a bad. Like we would assume that, hey, when prices go down, that's good. I can afford more stuff. Well, if prices go down in an economy, that means that no one's buying stuff, and it's actually probably going to be a pretty unhealthy economy in terms of overall. So when no one has jobs, prices go down, and if you look at the statistics from the Great Depression, you would see that occurring. We also had prices go down in 2009 during our recession a decade ago. All right, closing out here. We kind of see Republicans versus Democrats sometimes, and right now, if you were to ask Democrats what they thought economically, they would say that the government can do more to fix things, and they want a little bit more government involvement. Republicans, on the other hand, kind of believe the opposite. In general, this isn't necessarily every Republican or every Democrat, but they kind of say that there should be a free market and that the government should stay out of those policies. Okay, make sure you check for the assignment tomorrow for today, and I will talk to you guys again on Wednesday.